Hi everyone, this is Ellen Francisco. Thanks for coming to my channel. We're talking about this week's eclipse energy. We're in between two eclipses, the one on November 30th and the one on December 14th. One of them is a little bit like endings and the other one's a lot like beginnings. So if your cup runneth over, is it because you're in extreme situations? What's lurking behind the influence of Ace of Cups in this reading? It's the devil. So yes, I'm going to say it's going to be a topsy-turvy couple of weeks, and anything is possible. Wheel of Fortune is not far behind either. The final card in this spread, Three of Swords. So yep, we're in for it. The rest of this detail is coming up next. This card is crossing this week. Who? None other than the Devil of Darkness himself. That's at the center of our reading. He's in fact in the upside down position, coming in strong, with lots of challenge and opportunity for growth. How excessive is excessive? We will certainly find out as we try to use temperance in difficult circumstances. Blind to all kinds of things, we still see plenty fine. The divine light always shines down, and the wheels of fortune are always spinning. Sometimes it's just a matter of time. We're right between two eclipses. We had our eclipse on November 30th in Gemini, and we're heading towards our eclipse in Sagittarius. We went from the moon eclipse to the solar eclipse coming up. So this is what I call, and is what is known as the Celtic Cross spread. This card technically crosses this. So we're going to talk about these influences, looking at everything overall. You can see there are a lot of swords in this spread, even the wands, and yeah, so let's get right into it. It's very interesting to me. Devil upside down. So I spoke recently about having our addictions and things, maybe people in our lives that we don't like or that we have difficulty in relationships with, and the devil represents that. Interestingly enough, he's coming in upside down, which means that these relationships could be turning you upside down as well, and the idea that you want to be either free of these situations or at least free of these habits, or you know, even just small vices that you don't really feel comfortable indulging in. And then at the base of everything underneath, well, let's talk about the Ace of Cups crossing it. So the emotional content, it's interesting, you know, when you see this cup, it looks like it's overfilling, but energetically speaking, it's almost like we've got holes in the cup, and you know, so no matter what we fill it with, we're not really satisfied in this kind of a stage. Also, the things that we might have really attuned to and before that were important to us, that were tied to our emotional growth, are suddenly in question, essentially. When you deal with aces, you're dealing usually with some kind of divine intervention as well, the possibility of divine intervention. Devil is also, in a lot of ways, materialism. It could represent capitalism and the fact that the entire world is upside down and not doing too well, trying to figure out where to hold and what to let go of. So it would be really important during this phase to be really connected to Where is your emotional depth and what is it asking from you? Also, your own God within is speaking to you at all times. So what is that voice saying during these troubled times? It's easy to burn out on your own inner resources during phases like this, especially if you have uncertainty in your own life. Often your brain will try to make sense of things constantly. So in the background, you'll be just wearing down your mental processes. You might feel worn out emotionally and mentally and physically, not really have a ton of motivation. But just this giant desire to be free of it all, you know. So here we have temperance at the bottom, which is basically in the Celtic Cross, the underlying influences surrounding the overall energies. And here we're talking about balance and trying to stabilize not only what's going on emotionally, but what's happening in a divine sense, because for sure, our spirit lives are opening up in one way or another, whether that's your increased sensitivity or your openness to creative problem solving. It could be, you know, being forced into situations where you have to look at things differently, and that you've also got to balance off a bunch of conflicting energies or confusing energies, trying to make sense of everything. Also, it speaks to, you know, burning the candle at both ends. Are you pushing too much, trying to do too much again? The other thing that temperance can bring up as well is just how willing are you to compromise? What are you willing to compromise on? These last few months, you would have figured out a little bit more about what's most important to you and what really resonates with you. So you may be cooperating in ways with the universe that you didn't expect to, even in just sort of day-to-day settings, being called to do things that you wouldn't have expected to do. So how do you balance these new parts of yourself or new things that are coming into light, and how do you basically go with that flow? Two of Swords coming up on the side usually represents you know, what's on its way out, right? So here you've got a figure with swords, obviously tools, resourceful, pieces of metal, and you've got a blindfold, or sitting in front of water, which to me is always either the emotional body or the deep subconscious. Both can be accessed, one without the other and with each other. And then, of course, the moon and the illumination in the background, and the birds. So here her sixth chakra, third eye, is open and free. She's seeing, as far as I'm concerned, everything from inside pretty well, although she might not understand it. She might not be able to use the resources that she's unveiling, so to speak, blindly unveiling. The world is full of paradox, and so is your own spiritual growth, and so is your own expansion into more of your own upper divine self, higher divine self. So the propensity towards going within, right? Trying to calm the storm, trying to silence the chatter. How are you finding an internal peace? Where is that in you? Are you even comfortable sitting long enough to find it? And then at the top of this spread, a sun. Little child, innocently and vulnerably, riding a horse under sunshine. So when I look at this, I think, okay, well, yes, we do have a solar eclipse coming up, so that is ahead of us. Vulnerability. To me, the sun also speaks today about the ability to be rewarded for your own inner work that you've done, the servitude of sorts that you've complied with your own divine self, and being asked to do certain things, to work on certain things, to be aware of certain things. So in some ways, we're trying to become more comfortable anyway, standing in our own true light. Where are our basics? What are our basics that we're grateful for? Lots of illumination as well. I think too, for people that have really been tuned in and in flow with their own lives, that this period is really opening up an amazing reward cycle where you can manifest a little bit easier, where things don't necessarily come with difficulty. And of course, Wheel of Fortune over here. I'm thinking about this as far as, well, karma. I always see karma when I look at Wheel of Fortune, but I also see how, are we resourceful? Are we willing to, what's at our fingertips to work with? Are we comfortable doing it? Are we willing to accept that our own will usually isn't enough, that divine will has its place in our daily life, and going with that flow allows more of its nature to kind of find you too, like a law of attraction meets the here and now. So all the little bit of work that you've been doing to make sure that you're as stable as possible is seen. Like the universe sees that. Your divine higher self knows how hard you're working and what depths you're willing to go to. And often we'll see reflections in the people around us, in ways that we can measure our own abilities. The other thing about Sun 2 up here is that, let's look at it as opposing the devil that's really hung up on surfaces and things and materialisms and embellishments and wanting it all and not wanting to have to pay for it and on and on and on, And then you've got the sun where you're basically stripped of all pretense and you don't need anything but the divine light around you. So it's like going from the depths of your shadow, basically, and coming around into your more divine self. So, being willing to face your darkest and most imperfect, and I say that in stride because we all have different ideas of what imperfect is, but looking at your own shadow and being willing to do that work definitely has rewards. So if you've done your work, you can expect some beautiful things to come through. It's pointing as well for me when I look at Wheel of Fortune. I still think a lot of us are really spinny, our energy, like we don't know which way is up, and sometimes we can not have patience, and it can really rub up against our own energy systems in ways that make us just feel totally frazzled, almost like our nerves are on edge. And it's easy to also, under this cycle, and this is kind of coming in, right? So if you're not already feeling that spinny, I'm not sure where the ground is energy, you may be feeling that in the next little bit as this other eclipse heads towards us and seats itself in, because it is a little fiery, this one coming up. And so are you fanning the flames of karma, or are you completing karmic cycles and starting a new cycle of growth through more soul alignment, more alignment even with your soul purpose here on the earth? I really feel like this year people had a giant opportunity to strip all kinds of things away and really get at the core. So, and if you're not in some life or death crisis in the moment, you're probably managing relatively well in the status quo, just trying to stabilize and do whatever you can to keep things going. So, you know, it is all the small steps. It's the tiny little steps that you take moment to moment that build your karma in one direction or another. So try to just go slow, take your time, don't rush too fast, don't try to sell yourself on the idea that you have to do this or have to do that. Unless it's really a calling from your heart or from your deepest soul that you must do it. Yeah, if it's just sort of this pretense that's slapped on and you're living by some code that's, you know, somebody else wrote that doesn't have a ton of meaning to you, but you're just gravitating towards because you can't find yourself, so you don't know what to do, you know, maybe bypass that a little bit, give yourself the benefit of the doubt and wait it out, because there's so much that is connecting in deeper levels of everyone in so many ways that if you don't have it right yet, it's probably not going to be long before you do. So do what you can to just enjoy the fact that some of this is so beyond your control that you may as well just succumb and enjoy and watch and try not to miss all the little pieces that are so exquisite nonetheless, you know, because mostly things aren't as bad as we think. Mostly they're way better than they are. And our higher selves are always working to make sure that we can try to find our most exalted selves, which of course is, you know, vulnerable and clear and living under divine light. So not to scare you, but these last 4 cards don't really look all that great, right? Like they look a little, well, not the most positive cards in the deck, but let's talk about the obvious here. We've got blindfolded, 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 can't see. So really, if you think you're really going to be able to see where you're going in these next few weeks, not so much, as you will having to feel your way through it and understanding on an energetic level what is your go and what is your stop and what is your yes and what is your no. All right, so we're looking at 8 of Swords upside down. This card can often obviously mean that you're trapped, that you don't see any way out of a situation, that there's, you know, you don't have any resources and on and on and on. Like the kind of stuff that you would tell yourself on a bad day with tons of negativity and no hope on the horizon. So, you know, so whether you're actually just having a bad day and doing a little bit of negative self-talk or living a, you know, a real hell will depend on how true you are to yourself and really how much you're willing to be in alignment to what you need moment to moment and what your own inner God is expecting of you. So most of our messages come from somewhere and end up somewhere inside of us to be utilized. Having some quiet time to reflect and go inward and to be willing also to turn your own thoughts upside down. Maybe your thoughts aren't the best ones to follow. Maybe you can't believe what you think right now. Maybe it would be better for you to take a deep breath instead and just give yourself a day or two to figure it out instead of rushing into answers. 7 of Wands really speaks to the dexterity necessary to live in these current times, and the idea that we're willing to work hard enough to keep the status quo, to make sure that we're okay, that we will have unending energy to fight our fights, basically, and that there may be enough conflict that we need to defend our stance or our own sense of self. You know, you may, if you have difficulty keeping boundaries with people, you may have a bit of a challenge in the next little bit. So that may be some test for you to work with the universe over. And 9 of Swords with, again, can't see overlooking your natural resources. This can also mean depression. So if you're not using your talents and you're not using your God-given, divine, inspirational thoughts and processes, if you're not able to work with them in the world or manifest in a way that allows you to see some outcome, then you could be, you would be feeling very stagnant and probably moving towards a mild depression. And if not a full-on depression, at least a discomfort. This is a thing that happens a lot of times when we don't know what's going to be happening for us. We often, during our dream time, right? She's in bed, she's hanging out, she can't sleep, she's thinking about everything that's going wrong instead of right, and she doesn't think she has any resources, and yet this blanket is full of all kinds of secrets of the universe and things that she could pull on, as is the base of her bed is full of metamorphosing butterflies. So, you're definitely going to be deciding that there are a lot of things that you just don't want to deal with anymore during this phase and that just aren't you. So that might be the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night during this phase. It also could indicate that you're doing a lot of astral traveling, going into your own future, trying to ride your own timelines and figure out, what do I do with what I have? You might just feel like you've got no direction. So you're somewhat immobilized. And just because you feel that way doesn't mean it's so, right? So it's just that these influences that we're under are bringing us all kinds of options because so much is ill-defined right now and we're not really sure where we're all going. And to top it all off, we've got Three of Swords upside down, which I think is a kicker because here we are, working on our hearts. And sometimes we're the ones that betray our heart most. And sometimes we need to really look at how are we betraying ourselves and the things that we love. Or have we sacrificed? Have we built a life on sacrifice? And have we sacrificed ourselves? And if we're having a love affair with life, then where's the life part of it? So some of us are kind of waking up to these deadened parts of ourselves that need to be awakened and living under full light. And some of us have already seen, have just been waiting for the moment to, move things in a way that are more aligned with our heart. The idea, too, that a lot of people really do feel betrayed, right, by their government, by the world. It's almost like surviving an earthquake but never really trusting the earth again. We sort of have this combination of, we've built this construct of a world and so much has to change for it to work. But here we are just, doing what we can in our little mini cosmos, just trying to keep, the rain from hitting the windshield, basically. So back to the Wheel of Fortune, too, coming upon us, this can also mean that we had completely different ideas on where we are going, and then suddenly, kapoom, kapow, the universe is tossing us in a different direction. So, be malleable in the coming weeks. If you are under a change cycle, if you are under a growth cycle, if you are in a healing cycle, trying to complete things, often you'll feel like you're living between two worlds, the old world that was and the new world that's trying to come into being. So sometimes when the universe gives you these manifesting little things, you'll get a little bit of what it used to be instead of what you're moving into. So it'll get confusing and you'll be like, oh, I was trying to get out of this dynamic. Why is it showing up again? Why is this repetition here? Sometimes just as you're about to break through into a big whole new world for yourself, you do have these little stragglers from your old life that are trying to hold you back, back or bring you back, drag you down. Hey, come back into this old world where we thought we were happy. And it's tempting, but it's not really going to resonate that much with your soul calling. And or if it doesn't resonate with your soul calling, then it's not really where you're going to go. The eclipses, they just like to take you where they want, right? Like, definitely going with the flow is a good idea. Yeah, and back to Three of Swords. It is a bit, it has been an emotional drain. This is definitely a card that shows this has been something that's been really affecting you. So back to all our old wounds and the things that we've been trying to heal from our past. This is a reoccurring theme. So, you know, the universe really wants us to let it go and, you know, just let sleeping dogs lie in some ways. It's time to move on. It's also possible too that heartache can bring up waves of fears and anxieties because, you know, you feel a loss and then you begin to immediately fear that you will never have it again, that you just lost it, it's never coming back. So this the sense of undermining our own potential because something didn't work out and hanging our hat on the impossibility rather than the possibility is a dangerous road to take during this cycle because we've got this beautiful new moon eclipse that's going to bring in, you know, if you dare to dream and dare to rise and dare to shine and dare to wear you at your fullest. So choices, and choices. High road or low road, you know, minimum, maximum sentencing in your own life. What are you going to be committing yourself to? I think that a lot of people really do, even though they want to stabilize and normalize, we're just a little too flighty now. And we're sort of drifting. Like, I think we're not really much in our bodies during this next little eclipse in a lot of ways. I think that we're going to be, you know, a little too far into our own minds or going out of our minds or, our, you know, just our exit strategy is going to be through our own possible delusions. So it would be a great time to weave a narrative of fiction rather than creating delusions that are comfortable to live by. So leave the delusion where it belongs. Watch a little extra Netflix and keep it in that realm instead of imagining that your life is going to crash and burn and that nothing's ever going to happen to you, right? Or or the other polarity is so much is going to happen that's great that you don't even have to put any effort into it and it's just going to happen no matter what. So, you know, don't fall into the cracks of severities and too much polarization. Sort of soak in all the information, and grounding would be a little difficult during this period, I think, but just do the best you can. I don't know if being grounded is going to help as much as it's going to just in some ways just make some of our pain more obvious, right? Like that's what happens when you really live embodied. You really feel it all one way or another. So I think a lot of people have kind of been through enough, so they need a little bit of departure in their mind. They need a little bit of escapism. They need a little bit of, you know, celebration and all that kind of stuff regardless. And trying to keep your emotional cup full in as much as still gravitating toward those that are helping you feel more embodied and whole. Some people too would, with the Seven of Wands, you would want to be careful if you're putting effort into things that really aren't you. You know how sometimes we talk ourselves into doing things? Oh yeah, no, this is the right thing to do, and I'll just keep going and going and going and going and going and going and going like this. And you're just draining yourself and using all your inner strength. So know when to quit, right? Like, you know, there's always a voice inside of you somewhere, some way that you can tell is telling you maybe not so much this time. Maybe just enough instead of too much. Seven of Wands, victory can come through courage. So just being able to face parts of yourself or your own conflicts or deal with your conflicts head on, that takes some chutzpah, that takes some tenacity, and, you know, having a dedication to yourself when you are in flow and having these traits can take you right into the winner's circle, because you're not going to give up until you get there. So, you know, it really depends on where you are in your life, and hanging in there no matter what happens is good if what you're doing is really what you should be doing and, you know, really being led to do and feeling like you're in the flow of. But having that hanging in there no matter what happens when you're in a dysfunctional relationship that isn't feeding you is kind of self-defeating and ridiculously annoying to the people who know better, who love you and wish you would escape. So, you know, this whole cycle could also be bringing up the whole, you know, you're not the love of my life reality, and a lot of change may have to happen as a result. And that sense of feeling trapped and having no out is obviously in a number of these cards. You know, a lot of times people don't really want to admit that their lives are falling apart or that there are things that need improvement, right? It's easier just to kind of shirk it off into the distance and pretend it doesn't exist. But I don't think we're going to be able to do that as much with this next little bit of eclipsing. This is kind of the make the right choice eclipse, I think. You really want to make the choices that are in your best interest from a soul perspective and from a heart perspective too. So we're balancing out a lot of polarity still, facing a lot of anguish. If you're feeling the depression, then you're probably not feeling like moving, not feeling like doing too much, which will inevitably make the depression worse, because generally your soul likes to feel progress and movement and some kind of sense of purpose. So you may need to find ways to work around this or accept it, obviously, but don't allow it to be the only part of you that gets to express itself. And if your cup feels like you are just draining off all your resources and you need some divine help, then prayer will work. So will just speaking out loud about your problems. Often just somebody hearing them can help you find ways to solve them. So maybe don't keep so much hidden under, right? Like a lot of people think they're going through hard times and they can't cry on a shoulder, or they can't say, I'm having a hard time. They just don't think it's something they should do. But sometimes just letting that kind of stuff out is enough for the universe to kind of help moving things around, or there may be alternative ways of looking at things. There are definitely going to be alternative ways of doing things in the coming months as well, opportunities to do things completely differently. So this is a good time to take that time internally and still your mind and take the time to understand what it is that you're seeing in your internal world, instead of placing all the importance on what's going on in the outer world that you can see. What's going on in the inner world that you can't quite grasp but you know is there, and you're going to use all your sentient abilities to tune into. So definitely try to accept that you will be in one way or another more psychic or more open or more receptive, more of a satellite for information coming in. And often during these periods you may feel odd things in your own body anyway, and things that you may feel you're wrestling with one way or another. So don't beat yourself up too much. You want to take some of this in stride and know that this period is really meant to help you to stay fluid rather than holding on too much too soon. I think a lot of other things are going to be shifting. So don't get too comfortable in wanting a stagnating lifestyle where you don't have to do too much or grow too much or be too much. If you just go with it. And it's also, you know, I really feel like we were getting rid of old cycles, old dynamics that really weren't serving us, that the whole point of these last few months and last eclipses this year were to help us just finish, complete, you know, enough with this silly dynamic that just keeps showing up in relationships over and over and over again, in personal relationships or in business relationships, or I'm always the one holding the, you know, short end of the stick. Well, if that's the case, look at your inner value and why are you connecting to life in that way? Like why wouldn't it be a win-win? Where's the win-win in your being? So find that instead of regurgitating this, I'm always the one left with nothing, or whatever your little thing is, right? We all have this default belief system that gets in our way and that doesn't serve us and that moves us in circles and circles and circles until we're just tired and old and our back wants to break. You know, so this is a choice. You get to choose. Do I perpetuate this cycle because it's working for me? Or do I dismantle it? Am I brave enough to allow this flow of the universe and this impetus, this push from the universe that's coming my way to direct me? And the fact is, you know, I don't know if we're clear-minded at any time during this phase because of so much changing in our own mental fields and in our belief systems, and in just the very fact that the brain is going to want to grasp onto anything if we don't know anything. So we're going to just, you know, in order to find our base or our home or our ground or our anchor, we're going to try to tie into things that maybe aren't what we're meant to be tying into, right? Like you can be very easily fooled during these kind of cycles when the polarities are running and nothing's certain. So, you know, better to do nothing and then do something that you do have to undo again, and that might still be in the old energies. And that's another thing. You do want to move into the new energies with open-minded ideas. We are having to face the sense of how do we self-destruct. You know, we all have an ability to self-destruct. We just need the right set of circumstances and the right amount of pressure, and we are all there reduced to nothing. And this is, I think, part of what's going on in the world, is that there's a huge shift in the kind of situations that people are in that are forcing them into situations where they need to make decisions they're not comfortable making. And anything that isn't really walking towards what you really want to do, ultimately, it just seems like the stakes are higher right now to me, that we don't have as much leniency from the universe if we are choosing things that are not really for our highest good. And a lot of times highest good can be confusing, because sometimes the universe wants us in terrible relationships so that we do understand what our value is. And sometimes we need to see that we have no value in the eyes of others before we find the value in ourselves. So you needed that situation to find that. But did you get the lesson and run with it? Or did you succumb and become less than and let, life suck from you? So, these are the kind of choices that we make every day. Are we gonna, take what we've learned from a situation and excel and grow next and run with these new insights? Or are we going to cordon off and be afraid and relinquish our light to something else? That's the dilemma day to day that some of us live with. So sensitivities for sure on the rise. You see all these cards are alluding to the fact that we can see without seeing. I think that that's the point too. We're trying to find our own ways that we can trust ourselves anyway. We need to have the trust in ourselves. We need to understand who we are and what we're doing and where we're going enough that we can get there, whether we see the path or not. And what a jumble of cards it is. There you have it. Until another one. Opportunities abound to become more in tune and attuned. So as always, may the force be with you. Live your truest potentials and opportunities. That's the other thing too. You know what? This is a time where opportunities that would blow your mind, that you would never think are possible, can land in your lap just because you're open and willing to keep more than just a narrow perspective. And when you go through these emotional ups and downs and you really dig in and face yourself and aren't afraid to shine your own light on your inconsistencies or foibles or mistakes, then, what power is that? It's almost like you're admitting your own defeat is enough to make you a winner. It's like that kind of riddle of the universe. It would, you would think, oh, I'm just going to pull off and be by myself. You think nothing would happen, but you'd learn more about humanity in that time alone than you would if you were amongst a million people. So there are all kinds of ways that you can nourish yourself emotionally. Yeah. So fill your cup with things you want. Drink the nourishment from the world, the parts that nourish you. Let all the other stuff fall off of you. That doesn't need to stick. You do have a right to make life the way you want. You do have enough creative energy and divine light running through you that you could become impossibly perfect and, live a beautiful, gorgeous existence. And I think a lot of people are feeling like, oh, I can't shine when the whole world is falling apart, and that's just not true. So shine where you can. People need your light too. Have a beautiful day and a beautiful week. Don't let this guy tear you down. Better things are coming. Brighter days are ahead.